So, United Kingdom, and everyone who is not yet aware of this, we need to talk. The Home Secretary for Britain, Amber Rudd, wants to pass a new law that will hunt down and prosecute people according to their web browsing activity. Now, the articles that discuss this are very easy to find. I'll link to a few in the description. At first, it sounds like she is serious about combating terrorism, but take a closer look, and you'll see that this new law proposed is actually very dangerous in and of itself. I'll read a little bit from the article published by The Guardian. Okay. People who repeatedly view terrorist content online could face up to 15 years behind bars in a move designed to tighten the laws tackling radicalization. The Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, is to announce on Tuesday. I guess that means November 14th, which is, well, tomorrow as I'm recording this video. A new maximum penalty of 15 years imprisonment will also apply to terrorists who publish information about members of the armed forces, police, and intelligence services for the purposes of preparing acts of terrorism. I wonder how they're going to deduce who is who there. The tightening of the law around viewing terrorist material is part of a review of the government's counter-terrorism strategy following the increasing frequency of terrorist attacks in Britain this year. So, these are in quotations. I guess they're Amber Rudd's words. I want to make sure those who view despicable terrorist content online, including jihadi websites, far-right propaganda, and bomb-making instructions, face the full force of the law, said Rudd. There is currently a gap in the law around material that is viewed or streamed from the internet without being permanently downloaded. Okay. Here's the first problem, Britain. It's too late. The jihadis have been operating in your countries for years now. Britain, country, and Europe as a whole, they're already there. Even if you were to remove, even if you stretched possibility to the extent that you could remove all terrorist useful or supporting content or terrorist instructing content from the internet, the recruiters and radicalizers already have the information, along with huge populations in Europe. It's too late to do things that way, even if it were possible. Second, listen to this description of what she calls forbidden content again. Jihadi websites, far-right propaganda, and bomb-making instructions. I'm sorry, what? What was in the middle there? Far-right? What do you define as far-right? You know, whenever someone in a position of power uses very vague language, you should be really nervous, because they've left it open to be twisted into whatever they want it to be. For example, the Defend the Europe missions, or attempts really, were considered far-right. Europeans who want to defend European people and values first, so the people in their own countries first, have been slammed repeatedly as far-right. It's not people on the right who have flooded your countries with terrorists. It's those on the left. The people on the right, what conservatives in Europe once were, what conservatives in the United States are trying to be, or trying to hold on to, are the people who are standing against the mass waves of immigration. Saying at least, let's get a little bit better of an idea of what we're dealing with, a little bit more control. And trying to say, slow down, with reason and logic instead of those on the left who are ravaging and burning their own cities, calling everyone who so much as raised an alternative perspective or any level of being simply skeptical of bloating government power as Nazis. A lot of people in my own family have even called me this for saying, whoa, let's just get some perspective before we start falsely accusing each other of being the worst people in the world. By the way, if they want to talk about real Nazis in history, the Nazis were on the left. Everyone talks about them having been nationalists, but the second part of that word stood for socialists. National Socialists. Socialism and communism, the Red Plagues spreading all over the world yet again, feed totalitarianism. They do not fight it. They do not stand against it. In fact, the surrendering of all the power to the government is one of the ways it takes extreme efforts, the government takes extreme efforts to make sure that people cannot and will not be able to fight it. It's a plane going over my house. If you were able to hear that. It's hard to tell how the sound travels here, and there have been a lot of planes recently. I do keep my eyes out and ears open. Or ears open and eyes... You know what I mean. I looked up nationalism, just the definition of the word, on Google. Wikipedia has its definition as patriotism, loyalty, and pride in one's country, and core principles. Now, it can be, and has been, taken further by various peoples across the globe and throughout history, to be a sense of superiority of one's own country and culture over all others. But every country on Earth, every people on Earth has that has ever existed, has that to some degree. This is leftists who have lost the intellectual arguments, imposing their will on people by making any opposition, even alternative points of view based on personal accountability, self-reliance, and logic, into a criminal offense, which it never was and is not. More than that, are they going to arrest everyone who watches videos that discuss conservative values that we just listed, which are actually good values to hold? Values based on personal accountability and self-reliance? Well, where's theirs? Where are their values? Where are their morals? If they are preaching a very twisted sense of diversity and tolerance without having any accountability themselves. See, one of the primary reasons that conservatives favor smaller governments is because governments that start getting more and more power over the people just don't stop. And just like school administrations, they never come to understand, or, well, I should say they never care, that they can improve the lives of people, actually improve, protecting the people they are supposed to protect and serve, which they absolutely suck at doing, by relaxing and cutting back on restrictions. They only ever increase them. You see this with governments, you see this with schools, you see this with parenting. Punishments for everyone but them, kind of thing. And Westerners are already at a point where I feel like they can make no move in life at all. And yet we still all praise movies where people rebel against governments that do that. Although I do, to some extent, blame this on the all too common portrayal of rebels who are, throughout human history, have been much more like terrorists than actually honorable freedom fighters, which is... so I do kind of blame that skewed version of rebels that we usually do get, to some extent, along with other things, but... you know, the truth and information is out there. And people have been ignoring it for far too long. And we are at such a dangerous point. So, if you haven't thought of it from this angle, you might want to take a moment to consider this. How effective have the European governments been so far at stopping and preventing terrorist attacks on their land? Yeah, that's what I thought. Then, remember the famous saying, "Those who trade freedom for safety will have neither." Now, I'm of the opinion that safety is an illusion anyway, or at least extremely temporary, if you have any realist point of view at all. But the governments have not been keeping you safe to begin with. This law goes through, and it doesn't look like there's that much of a resistance to it. You're in for some very dark times, United Kingdom. And other countries will, or could, quickly follow. If you watch movies or read books about the rise of dictatorships, what's the most common justification that the government dictators use to take over and begin exterminating any opposition? We're not talking about silencing anymore. We're talking about, and it could happen very quickly, flat out extermination. Hidden from the public view by the government saying, perhaps, well, they were repeatedly watching unapproved content and so we sent them to jail for 15 years. Yeah, maybe they're not coming back. It could go this way very, very quickly. And what's the justification that the governments will use? For the safety of the people. And before you know it, hundreds of thousands of people are being murdered by their own governments. It's happened many times. And even if this, even if I took these Amber Rudd's stated intentions at face value, even if I would go so far, which I won't, but if I went so far as to completely trust that this was about combating terrorism in this way, at this point, with this strategy, even taking it at face value honesty, which I don't, even if we stretch to that, too little, too late to fight it that way.